All right. Hi, everyone. We're here with our Managing Mountain Bike Trail Systems as population and popularity grow. We have a few different panelists on today's call, and so we have a couple that'll be popping in and out as we go here. Just to give you a little bit of an intro, there is a document that is attached to this session. So you can always click on that and take a look at some of the past questions that have been asked. My name is Jackie. I'm with Bike Utah. I'm going to be your moderator. If you visited a trailhead or spent any time riding or hiking single track in many places around Utah in 2020, you might have noticed a few more people joining you. It's beyond anecdotal. Data has been collected proving that Utahns recreated in greater numbers last year than in the past. Our panelists are trail stewards and managers at many of Utah's most popular mountain biking destinations. In the document attached to the session, they've already answered some questions about how they and their organizations are managing the influx of users. Today, we're going to chat about some of the common issues facing the safety and accessibility of many of Utah's most beloved recreational assets. And we're going to learn how you can help keep the traffic on our trails flowing smoothly, ensuring a positive user experience for everyone. First, let's meet our panelists. And we are going to start with Carly. Can we hear you, Carly? Okay, so we have Carly Lanch coming to us from Cache County. And Carly's maybe going to do some typing in the session chat there. But hopefully we can figure out how to get her speaker working and our mic working for her. Next, let's go to Madeline. Can you hear Madeline?
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself.
Yeah!
Okay, you guys can hear me, great. So my name is Madeline Lagowitz. I'm the Director of Grand County Active Transportation and Trails, also known as Moab Trail Mix. And so we're a part of the local government of Grand County based in Moab, Utah. And our role is to partner with local land management agencies, primarily the BLM, and we help them plan, design, and build non-motorized trails of all kind. And then we're also responsible for maintaining all those trails that we build. So currently we have a little bit over 160 miles of single track trails designed for mountain bike use that we help manage and maintain. But we also have built and maintained hiking trails, climbing access trails, and equestrian trails as well.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go to Cody.
Hey everyone, my name is Cody Ross. I am the Stewardship Director for the Cottonwood Canyons Foundation. We work primarily in Little Cottonwood, Big Cottonwood, and Mill Creek, and we're a small nonprofit that works in partnership with a bunch of other companies, Bike Utah, the Salt Lake Ranger District Forest Service, all the ski resorts on the Wasatch Front. And our primary task is to maintain and care for the trails in Big and Little Cottonwood as well as Mill Creek. So we work as an extension of the U.S. Forest Service. And if you see us out on the trails working, digging, doing repair and maintenance, it's usually us or the Forest Service on the Wasatch Front, and work a ton with bike trails, multi-use trails, kind of across the Wasatch. And yeah, it's been really great, and we're really happy to be around and work with all of our partners. So.
Awesome, thanks. And Matt.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Wagoner. I'm the Trails and Open Space Manager for the Snyderville Basin Special Recreation District. So that's the western part of Summit County in the Snyderville Basin or Park City area. I manage about 175 miles of all sorts of trails, including transportation, paved trails, multi-use natural surface trails, soft surface trails, and that doesn't include the winter trails we also maintain. So we manage and maintain those trails. And what I think makes our system really unique is the interconnectivity with the Park City system, which Mountain Trails also helps to maintain. So overall, about 400 miles of trails in the area, and easy access from the major metropolitan area of Salt Lake City. So definitely think a lot about trail congestion and issues that we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome. So some other folks that are hopefully popping back in, hopefully Carly can get her mic working. And then Rick Fournier from Mountain Trails Foundation was also in earlier and I think got kicked out of the internet. And in addition, we have Greg Hilbig from Draper, who will hopefully be joining us as well. So we're going to get started. And like I said, there's that document attached to the session, so you can get a little more history. And then also, you can always ping folks directly via the lounge or our people tab on your left if you have specific questions for specific folks. So we'll get started with our first question here. This is going to be kind of a panel discussion. I'll let everybody have a moment to answer, and then we'll kind of talk together afterwards as well. So we, as mentioned, have noticed in the, let's see if Carly has a mic right now. No, oh no, okay. Well, perhaps Carly can answer some, because she already knows the questions, so maybe she can toss us some answers in the chat and keep the chat going and lively for us while we chat here. So based on the pre-event questions, it's clear that user education is a major component of your work and plans. Can you explain more about what aspects riders need education on and ways to communicate that information? Madeline, let's start with you.
Okay, so in the Moab area, the general trend of visitation and trail use is increasing pretty much every year, it seems like. When I first moved to Moab, I remember the headline in the newspaper was that Arches National Park had just reached 1 million visitors, and that was like a big benchmark. And now the estimate is 3 million on BLM land. So it's not only more people, but they're also dispersed differently kind of across the landscape. And so the positive side of that is that Moab is beautiful and there's more people on the public lands. One of the challenges of that is that the desert here is extremely fragile, and the behaviors that we need people to kind of follow on the trails to help protect the area are not intuitive at all for a lot of people. And so it puts a lot of importance on education. And so one of the main issues that our organization deals with is off-trail riding, since the bulk of our mileage of trails is mountain biking trails. And so this is a problem because we have biological soil crust here, which maybe you guys have heard of because you're kind of in the field, but just for folks who haven't, it's basically this living ground cover in the desert. It's a living soil. And it's essential for the ecosystem here. It's also extremely fragile, and it has a long recovery time if it's disturbed or damaged. And so what this kind of looks like, what this issue looks like for us is if we have a trail and let's say one person has gotten off trail, they've cut a switchback, let's say, on their bicycle. In another area like Minnesota, let's say, or some other part of the country, that's really not going to make a huge impact. It's not going to be especially visible. Out here, that track will be extremely visible, and it actually won't really disappear on its own unless it's manually removed. So if once that track is there, it acts as an attractant to other people, either because they're kind of, they think it looks fun to go that way, or just because they're moving fast, and so they're making split-second decisions, and so they just follow it. And it only takes a handful of people before you then have a social trail that kind of creates confusion. And then it also can quickly widen, and so you end up with like a little swath of damage just from a few people going off trail. And so if you imagine that multiplied by 160 miles of single track, you can see why this is a concern for us. So what our crew spends time doing, in addition to just dealing with regular, maintenance for erosion and things like that, we spend a lot of time going out and trying to catch these things before they develop into problems. So a lot of like monitoring and just routine maintenance. Where we go and we actually rake out the tracks and try and put branches and lining and whatnot, so that we can disguise that area, because if it's left alone, it will recover. But if we're not proactive about it, it kind of just keeps getting worse. And so what we've been doing to work on this problem is we've really tried to beef up the educational sides of things. The last few years, we've been working on trailhead signage. We put out a survey and we found that about 70% of people only encounter educational sort of leave no trace type practices at trailheads. So, they're not going to Arches and going to the visitor center. They're kind of just going out to the BLM land. And so the two messages we've kind of honed in on for those areas are the desert is unique and fragile. So getting people in the mindset that it's different out here than where they're from, and the trails are different than where they're from. And then also you are one of 3 million people, because if you're coming from New York City, you may feel like you're in the wilderness out here, but actually, there's quite a lot of people on the trails. And so a lot of what we've been developing is user specific for the mountain bikers, and that includes developing graphics and some illustrations actually of showing like what the problem looks like, what trail widening looks like, and then also graphics to explain trail etiquette. So one problem that we have is that people don't necessarily know how to pass each other, especially during this time with coronavirus. People want to be really courteous, and so they ride way out off trail, like 50 feet off trail to go around other groups, but then that contributes really quickly to trail widening. So educating people about how to pass. We've also started doing what we call the mud report, which is like a trail conditions report, so that we can let the bike shops and the shuttle companies know what the trail conditions are, and then they can help kind of spread that word, since they're our first, I don't know if line of defense is the phrase I want, but they're like the first line of interaction, I guess, with visitors and the public. So future phases that we're looking at for education include just kind of continuing to work with local businesses. So the bike shops, the bike shuttle companies, everyone is really interested in helping. It's just, we're kind of in catch-up mode right now, trying to get the information out there. And then there's some areas where we haven't really approached groups about helping us with education. So for example, like hotels and accommodation, they could potentially have something in their little packets with the Wi-Fi password that talks a little bit about the environment. And big picture, we're also working with other groups there's a lot of parallel efforts going on for education, like the national parks and all the different land managers. So big picture, also trying to bring those groups together to come up with a few core messages that we can then kind of saturate the town with to help spread that word.
Awesome. I really think it's impactful to think of you're one of 3 million users on the trail. I think that is a really wild thing to think about, especially knowing when you're out in Moab, sometimes you don't see that many people out there at the moment you're there. So that's great. Yeah. Thank you. Since you brought up the idea of mud and some other things, let's go to Matt next.
Sure. Yeah, we do have slightly different conditions. I don't know that I've ever seen biotic soil crust up here, but real similar things to what Madeline was talking about, in that we also experience a lot of tourism. And one of the things that comes along with that is first-time trail users. So similarly, they don't necessarily know the protocol of yielding or interacting with other user types. So that's a real frequent message that we try to get out there. The biggest problem probably that we've seen that has really been exacerbated this last year with COVID is how people are transitioning from their mode of transportation into the backcountry trail system. So we see a lot of conflict at trailheads specifically. The way that the trail system developed here is really tightly integrated into the neighborhoods. So you often have to drive your car up into a neighborhood and park near someone's home, and then get on a trail and continue your ride or your hike, which creates a really tight kind of public-private interface. So the issues of etiquette at trailheads is really important for us, and parking specifically. I won't get ahead of ourselves because I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But one of the things that we found really valuable this year is face-to-face interaction. So we hired a staff enforcement patroller dedicated specifically to patrolling trailheads, talking to people at trailheads, enforcing the parking regulations. But I see it as kind of a two-part or two-pronged attack, where we're trying to educate them as much as we can while we have that face-to-face interaction at the trailheads. And we've actually found that to be really successful with both etiquette and with parking issues. We have also similar trail conditions issues especially right now in the shoulder seasons. So we provide some of that information online on our online mapping. So So we find that really helpful, that we can send somebody to our webpage and they can look at the trail conditions, and our maintenance crew is really diligent about updating those and also giving updates on the local radio station about trail conditions. And we're also as diligent as we can be about signage, putting A-frame signage out there at trailheads during mud season to get the message across that people need to be respectful of trail conditions and patient as trails dry up in these shoulder seasons, because we do have this dual season nature, very, very wet and then very dry. So that's the bulk of what we've done this year. We've embarked on a pretty extensive plan to manage access, and the ranger and in-person education aspect of it has been probably the biggest effort so far.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know specifically for you guys, and also of course kind of in partnership in a way with Mountain Trails, like your websites are so comprehensive that is where a lot of folks just to find any information are going, and so that's a great resource that you have there. That's awesome. All right, Cody.
Yeah, to build on what Madeline and Matthew said, both of them, I mean, what Madeline was saying with kind of the new user-created trails, what we see with the amount of people, the increase in visitors that we've seen to the Wasatch Front over the past year has been a pretty incredible thing to witness, but it's really neat. We deal with a lot of multi-use trails, so the main thing for us is trying to educate riders just about how to use the trails with other trail users. I mean, with Mill Creek Canyon being one of the limited areas where everyone can take domesticated animals, and Big and Little Cottonwood being more strict, but still having available riding, it's become more and more prevalent that we are finding ways to educate people just about how to use the trails with other users in the Cottonwoods, as well as kind of just the trail system that exists. So currently, right now, we're actually working with the Forest Service to develop a master trails plan for the Wasatch, and that is going to be a multi-year process, and that involves it's a lot of people out there with GPS actually tracking and measuring and grading all of the trails that exist, that are official trails or not, and creating a giant map, and then from that, seeing what we can get. If there's trails that hopefully someday can be adopted, they're being well used, they were built well, they're sustainable. And then the rest of it is, what do we need to close down? What do we need to start educating people? This isn't a sustainable trail. It is a great option, and in the future, we'd love to build a trail here, but right now, like, we just need to kind of protect the area that we are all enjoying on our public lands. And that's one of the main things for our foundation, is education. And just educating people on a daily basis. I mean, the user-created trails do cause a dramatic amount of erosion, especially in the Cottonwood Canyons, because the terrain is so steep and because the forest is so young. The Cottonwood Canyons didn't have any trees at the turn of the century in 1900. All the trees had been logged out to build Salt Lake City and for the mining, and there was a huge erosion problem. And the Wasatch is a relatively new forest, and people don't really know that. And I think one of our biggest goals has been educating people about that and about the watershed. A lot of people don't realize that 60% of Salt Lake City's drinking water comes out of just Little and Big Cottonwood Canyon. So we work with an education department within our foundation to educate people. We have recently hired some more kind of rangers, more naturalists that will be placing higher up in the Cottonwood Canyons. And then our trails crew and our invasives crew work on education as well when they're out working in the canyons. So our goal is to really just educate people person to person, much like Matt's crew is doing, and just letting people know the importance of the canyons and how to prevent erosion and how to share the trails properly. We also had a big goal last year. We installed a ton of signage within the Cottonwood Canyons for restoration, wayfinding, and watershed information. And we're going to continue doing that. We're lucky enough to work with the National Forest Foundation to get some signage and kind of just install that as needed throughout as we close down and restore user-created trails for bikers or hikers or anyone, just to let them know this is a restoration area and we're going to continue to work to protect the public lands and prevent erosion. But it's an uphill battle, but we're excited that there's more people in the canyons and there's more people enjoying it. And I think it's just education about the importance of the watershed and the trails that we have, and the appreciation will lead to a greater sustainability of it. So.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because though I knew about some of the ski area spots where trees are newer, I never really thought about how new across the Wasatch Front this forest is. And I think that, like, having lived here for so long, that if I'm just kind of learning that or understanding that now, I can only imagine how many people just have no concept of that. So that's really, really interesting. Carly, do we want to try again? Oh, hopefully we can have you paste. Hopefully we can have you paste a response into the chat, and maybe we can get some DMs going for you as well. We're going to go ahead and we can keep working on the sound issue, but we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. And I'm actually going to, based on everything that everyone just kind of spoke about, because it seems to be the bigger issue, one of the questions I had was about trailhead crowding, and I think we can all kind of, relate to that. But I think a bigger one, and one that seems to really stick out to me as we have these conversations, is the trail wear and tear. And that seems to be a really major concern. And so what I'd like to do next is discuss a bit about how trail maintenance contributes to user safety and how you manage that need for more work, since each of you kind of really touched on the fact that with more users comes more need for more work. And obviously that plays into that education side as well. But what actually contributes to the user safety, and also what are those maintenance needs, and how can maybe some of us average riders help with that, as well as how can your communities potentially help you out with that? Let's go ahead and start with Matt.
Sure. So I think a lot about how to create a culture of stewardship around trails. And it's something that I've experienced in previous places I've worked, that you can really do that well with building volunteerism and allowing people to participate in the maintenance of the trail system themselves. And not only does it make them better riders in the way that they understand the trail system, but it makes them better and makes them more courteous as well, and safer riders, if we're talking about bikers specifically. So allowing people to participate directly in how the trail system is maintained kind of solves two issues, in that you build stewardship, you build support for your organization, and that has effects across the board of making it easier to raise funds and solicit donations and those sorts of things, but also to increase trail etiquette and to really build that social network of support as well. So it's something that can be done. It can be a multiplier of your staff and your capacity, but it also has to be said that it's not. Volunteerism isn't free labor. It takes a lot of time and a lot of consistent communication to maintain a core of volunteers. So it's definitely something that I think a lot about, and something that we could do better. Last year was really not the year to build a stewardship program and try to get a bunch of people together in groups. But I'm really optimistic that we have the capacity, and it's something that would help our trail system across the board to be able to just have a more community-based participatory maintenance program.
Awesome. What about you, Madeline?
So I feel like there's a lot of parts to that question, but I've kind of been thinking about, how has this area responded to the need for increased maintenance? And so our organization in 2019 went through a structural change. So previously, Moab Trail Mix was a committee of the county, and all of the field staff, including myself, were actually employees of a local nonprofit that acted as an umbrella nonprofit. And this worked really well for a long time. However, as the organization was successful in like building more trails and becoming responsible for maintaining these trails, it kind of grew to the point where it needed more full-time staff and more resources. And so it kind of outgrew that model. And so fortunately, the county council voted to create a new department to become an organization, basically. And so that is now Grand County Active Transportation and Trails, GCAT for short. And what that really did is it created more stable funding for us. It allowed us to have full-time employees. And then also we had access to all these resources that the county has. So for example, I have an office now. We have trucks. We have, if we need equipment like a flatbed trailer, you know, we have access to that as well. So, I mean, it really helped just sort of invest in this infrastructure like you would another economic asset like the roads, and help sustain, you know, help to assure that the trails will get like long-term maintenance and also formalize the relationship with the land managers for the long term. So it's put us in a really good spot to be positioned to address these issues as they develop, as we get more visitation and users on the trails.
Awesome. And what about you, Cody?
Yeah, the wear and tear is increasing, and I agree with Matt. Like, coming from our foundation, our mission is to provide stewardship through education for our area, and our foundation normally does about 700 volunteers a year, which is really great. And just from seeing the process and the progress that they can make, it's definitely just not free labor. I will fully agree with that. It is a lot of work, but some of the best benefits that we've seen working on multi-use trails, bike-specific trail, anything is been great from the volunteer side. I mean, getting people out there and showing them what it takes to maintain and care for the trails, and why that we need to maintain the trails to increase the safety, and how safety equals sustainability, and sustainability just equals a trail system to enjoy for a long time, has been really great. And I think that's one of the best ways to engage people, and that's going to be one of the best drivers to kind of help us all just complete the amount of work that just continues to grow each year. I think it's a great avenue. I think it's a lot of work. We've been really lucky to do it in the past, and we have a structure set up. Last year was tough. Last year was a lot of work with the increase in people and the lack of volunteers. It was a noticeable difference. So I think as we move into the future, more community engagement is going to be the overall answer that's going to help everyone kind of be able to maintain and participate and keep the trail system usable.
Awesome. So it looks like we have Greg from Draper joining us here. And before we say hi to Greg, I just want to give a quick shout out to everybody who's watching, and see if you have any questions to drop into the chat so we can ask the folks here in a second. But then also, we have a quick question for Madeline, which is, do you have a website that shows all your trail signage, education, and tools that you are implementing?
So we have moabtrailteam.com will redirect to our county website, and that has, I just checked, we have some of it up there. I think we had trouble uploading parts of, some of our signs, but if there's interest, the more widespread that message is, the better for everyone. So we'd love to get that out to people.
Awesome, thank you. And Greg, just to catch up a little bit, I'll have you just do a quick intro of yourself, and then also just a quick discussion of what you've kind of been working with over the past year in order to make sure that your trails maintain their safety and accessibility as we see a little bit more population using them.
Sure. Sorry it took so long. We changed our email, and I kept trying to log in onto the old email, and it wouldn't work. Sorry, what was your question?
All good. Just a quick intro, and just let us know kind of some of the things you're doing there in Draper to mitigate some of the, because what's awesome is Greg gave us some great graphs in that document that's attached to this session that actually shows some of the user increases over in Corner Canyon, and maybe just speak a little bit to what that population increase has been doing for you down there.
Yeah, so I'm the Trails and Open Space Manager for Draper City. Been here 14 years, and we've basically more than doubled the amount of trails we've had in the last 6 or 7 years. As far as the crowds, we have expanded some trailheads. I've tried to use social media, especially last year about this time when we just saw a huge explosion. Trying to put out information about less popular trails. Don't go at Saturday at 11 a.m. Pick different times to go. Try to spacing out, and that worked to some extent. However, we just saw so many of the new and inexperienced that would show up, Saturday 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning to the most popular trailheads just to be frustrated and then park illegally and do what people do in that situation.
So what are some of the things that you're doing to kind of mitigate some of that?
That's a good question. We are expanding one of our trailheads to allow more parking, which personally I don't think was the best idea. I think we need to think further along those lines, just because we're adding about 20 parking spots. One of the things we did do is we added maps to the most popular trailhead saying, look, if this one's full, here's a map to another trailhead that's less than a mile away that's usually not full at all.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky thing, right? Because you want to be close, but you kind of forget that you can pedal your bike to a place to actually ride your bike, which actually I'd love to open it up to kind of everyone at this point. We have a couple minutes left, and seems like we're being so thorough. We don't have tons of questions in the chat. So if you guys do have questions, feel free to ask. But I know something that obviously is dear to Bike Utah and also to some of your systems is riding or taking public transportation to the trailhead. I was just thinking we'd open it up maybe to some discussion about what some options are to encourage people to not drive to ride.
Sure, I'll jump in on that one. That's a big, like I said, we're embarking on some access planning work right now, and one of the things we're finding in agreement with what Greg is talking about is not always the best idea to just increase parking. You can induce demand, and parking is one of the only ways we really have to kind of control how many users are on the trail and mitigate trail congestion as opposed to just parking congestion. So I really like to think about it in the long term as well, Greg, and talk about transportation as the real long-term solution. So we've worked really closely with our county transportation department to create some pretty simple solutions for improving active transportation. One of the things we're doing this summer is just very simply putting bike racks at trailheads, which we didn't have before. And another possibility is adding bike racks to transit services like buses. And then in the long term, trying to create some micro transit options that allow people to just eliminate personal vehicles from the trail experience altogether. But yeah, working with your transportation district or organization to really increase the connectivity of the active transportation to your trail access points, I think is going to be the long-term play.
What about you, Cody, getting people up the Cottonwood Canyons?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. Like the bike racks at the trailheads is an amazing idea. I think that's great. And just trying to get people to the trailheads without the use of vehicles is tough. I mean, we see it in the winter as much as we see it in the summer. And at this point, there's kind of no difference. The summers are just as busy with the ski resorts closed. And just seeing that transit, we just continue to look towards UDOT transportation. We're continually trying to see if there's other avenues for that, just to make the public transit more prevalent. I mean, really, it's the availability of it. In the winter is there, but in the summer, the ski resorts in the summer see just as many people in the winter now, and we need to work with Utah and find a way to kind of increase the access that eliminates cars. Because if you've been to Little or Big Cottonwood on a Saturday, you've seen the vehicle pile up. So yeah, we're just continuing to look forward to see if there's other ways that we can get people into the canyons. But because the steepness of Little and Big and even Mill Creek, the barriers to entry for people biking to a lot of the trailheads is pretty high. So we're looking for other options, and yeah, hoping that we can make some changes in the future.
Awesome. Well, we do have one more comment here, and that is that someone on the chat would love to see more documents or links to what's been discussed, and might be reaching out to contact you in the future. And I would suggest maybe heading over to the lounge in order to the Day One lounge in order to continue the discussion. I think, you know, there's obviously a lot more to talk about here, and I really appreciate everyone participating, not only in the chat, but live, but also in the typed chat. We really appreciate your support, and be sure to join the next session. And we have a UDOT presentation coming up in just a few minutes, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, everyone.